In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, San Francisco is home to America's most popular e-cigarette brand, Juul, but city officials seem to want nothing to do with it. We will talk about the city's crackdown on vaporizing. Plus, cyber attacks that appear linked to the U.S. and Iran. What is the possible endgame in this cyber warfare between nation states? And Oracle challenges the bidding process behind a $10 billion cloud contract with the U.S. Defense Department, which goes by the name JEDI. Will it force the process to stall? But first, to our lead. San Francisco is expected to become the first city in the United States to ban e-cigarettes. The city's Board of Supervisors will hold a final vote any moment now to ban the sale, distribution, and manufacturing of e-cigarettes, making it illegal to sell them in stores or online to local addresses. If approved, the measure will then go to Mayor London Breed to be signed into law, but the legislation could pit the city against one of its most popular startups, Juul Labs. Juul is based here in San Francisco, backed by Big Tobacco, and brought in more than $500 million in revenue in the first quarter of the year alone. Joining us to discuss Bloomberg's Ann Vandermeer with me here in San Francisco, and Eric Newcomer with us in New York. So, Ann, what's the status of this vote right now?
So we're waiting on the City Board of Supervisors to vote on whether, to take this big step right now. We're expecting it to happen, within the next couple minutes. And Juul has just become a really controversial company. People really don't like them. San Francisco really doesn't like them. And the main reason is that kids have been using some of their products.
So the health risks are largely unknown. I mean, you are inhaling liquid nicotine, heated liquid nicotine, essentially. But the long-term risks, we don't really know. And critics would argue, well, it's better than traditional cigarettes.
Right, exactly. And the sale of traditional cigarettes will still be allowed. The sale of marijuana will still be allowed. But, people are saying that because we don't know these risks, it's too much to let kids in schools use them. Now, kids are not allowed to use them, and Juul has said again and again that it is trying to prevent underage use of these products.
So, Eric, Ann makes a good point. Alcohol is legal, marijuana is legal, cigarettes are legal, e-cigarettes everywhere else are legal. Does it make sense for San Francisco to ban a legal product?
It's a very San Francisco city government move. It's a city that's brimming with the technology industry, but then the city government, especially from the tech perspective, doesn't always feel super friendly to it. I mean, it's also a city that's, put a soda tax in place, been on the forefront of the straws debate. So certainly a city government that's happy to sort of tax and restrict products in ways that they see that are to their citizens' benefit. And that's clearly the case here. And like Ann said, I mean, there's the risk that Juul is leading children to take up smoking when they wouldn't, pitted against people who otherwise will buy cigarettes in San Francisco, would continue buying cigarettes while they're legal, who would use e-cigarettes to try and mitigate the danger to them in consuming nicotine.
Right. Some of the concerns have been around the flavors. Well, why have a bubblegum flavor if you're not targeting a younger demographic? Juul, for its part, says the prohibition of vapor products for all adults in San Francisco will not effectively address the underage use and will leave cigarettes on shelves as the only choice for adult smokers. If you do look at the statistics, and the use of traditional cigarettes is way down, but vaping has spiked. I believe the number of teenagers in the United States has gone from 2% a decade ago to 20% of U.S. teenagers have tried e-cigarettes. What is San Francisco really concerned about?
So they say that 1 in 4 high schoolers have tried e-cigarettes and 1 in 14 middle schoolers. So you're really seeing this a lot in schools. I think San Francisco understands that it might not have a huge impact, huge impact on Juul itself by putting through these measures. But what they're hoping for is that other cities will kind of follow suit, and that as a result, it could have an impact on teen use in the country overall.
Eric, what are we hearing from investors? Because to be fair, this company is making money hand over fist. International sales are exploding. There's an Indonesian retail giant that's about to sign an exclusive deal with Juul. The shares are skyrocketing just because of that one deal with an e-cigarette maker. And you've got investors out there who are saying, look, this is the lesser of two evils.
You know, you saw investor Tiger Global pour into this company when it was controversial, and then Juul struck the Altria deal. So I think, you know, at every turn, Juul is going to look like a challenged company with regulatory backlash. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, nicotine is addictive, and that there are lots of people hooked on cigarettes and who like e-cigarettes, and that is a very profitable business. So there's going to be this fight between, you know, the history of nicotine-based products making companies a ton of money, and regulators who want to protect their citizens from addiction. And some investors are certainly happy to profit, and some would argue that this is a technology that's going to help people move away from more dangerous products. But certainly Juul's history, like we've said, with flavored tobacco products is going to hang in anyone's mind when they think about the company as someone who started off with a product that really appealed to teens.
Now, San Francisco, Anne, has paved the way with controversial rulings before legalizing same-sex marriages. San Francisco was the first city in the United States to do that, banning plastic grocery bags. San Francisco was also the first city in the U.S. to do that. We don't know what the right side of history is going to be in this particular situation, but Juul is sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It looks like this is going to overwhelmingly pass. What is their plan B?
So they do have a plan B. They're moving to get on the November ballot a measure that would ban the sale of e-cigarettes to anyone under age 21. Now, that would be a little bit more of a restriction than there is right now, and that would actually supersede this ban should it pass.
And there's also this potential ban going into effect on real estate and them even operating here, correct?
Right, exactly. Juul is headquartered on city property at Pier 70 just up the road. So the city is looking at passing a measure that would ban the sale, distribution, and manufacturing of e-cigarettes on city property. Juul will probably be grandfathered in, but they have bought a new building, and they are going to start moving employees there.
So that's a way around that other, city ordinance. Okay, well, we're going to be watching. We'll bring you the results of that vote as soon as we have it. Bloomberg's Ann Vandermeer and Eric Newcomer, thank you both. Now to Micron, the largest U.S. maker of computer memory chips, reporting profit that beat analyst estimates in the third quarter. This a sign that the company has been weathering the fallout of the China trade war better than expected. Huawei has previously been one of Micron's customers, accounting for more than 10% of its revenue. Coming up, Facebook's WhatsApp and Messenger have more than 1 billion users, yet generate almost no cash. How the tech giant's cryptocurrency Libra could change that. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Facebook hopes its new cryptocurrency will change industries, but if it's likely to transform anything, that would be its own messaging businesses. Mark Zuckerberg could potentially be taking a page out of China's WeChat playbook and experimenting with what's possible when messaging apps fold payments into the mix. Facebook has more than 1.5 billion users on both WhatsApp and Messenger, yet makes almost no money from those messaging services. So, could Libra be the answer? Joining us now with the latest, Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner in San Francisco. We've also got Jesse Westerbrook, who covers financial regulation, with us in Washington, D.C. So, Kurt, ever since Facebook bought WhatsApp, the question has been, well, how are you going to make money on it?
Right.
Same since they spun out Messenger. How could Libra help them bring in some dollars?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation that this could be a payments play, right? And so now if you have a digital currency, you have a digital wallet that's built into these apps, maybe you're going to use that to actually buy goods and services. Maybe you're going to use it to pay your bills someday, right? We've seen kind of how WeChat has become this master app in China where you can do all kinds of things. And I think there's some belief that Facebook could do the same, and that maybe all that payment transaction, there's a way that they could take, a slice of that.
So, Jesse, lawmakers have called a hearing on this in mid-July. They are not happy about it. You've got Maxine Waters calling for Facebook to stop developing this immediately. Describe the backlash that you've seen in Washington.
Well, I mean, ahead of the Libra announcement, there was already tons of skepticism about Facebook in Washington with the privacy issues and, holdover from the 2016 election. I think a lot of this stems from the fact is, lawmakers want these hearings because they want to know, is this really about facilitating payments, or is this about making Facebook even more powerful than it already is? And more powerful in a way that lawmakers don't have oversight of. The committees that are calling for these hearings, House Financial Services, Senate Banking Committee, their traditional constituencies are the banks, hedge funds, traditional financial companies. And if there's major financial activity that's going outside of that sort of regulated sphere, it's basically out of Washington's hands, and that's obviously a concern.
Right. And Kurt, what is the goal? When trust in Facebook is at an all-time low, it's hard to believe this isn't a play to become even more powerful.
Right. I think that Facebook has always had this idea that if it can, capture your everyday activity somewhere within the app, it makes it really hard to get rid of, right? You can't abandon Facebook if that's your only lifeline to friends and family. You can't abandon Facebook in the same sense if that's how you, buy things or pay your bills or send money to your family cross-border. So I think the more utility they can build in, the more that they think people are just going to be hooked and stick around.
So, Jesse, what could be the result of this hearing in July? Could Congress force Facebook to stop doing this right now? We've been certainly waiting for regulation out of Washington, and to be fair, cryptocurrency has been around for a while, and regulation has been slow to come.
Well, lawmakers can't really stop it. They can jawbone, they can sort of name and shame, but they don't really have any power to make Facebook hit the pause button. I think if they had that power, we would have seen Maxine Waters, the chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee, already try to execute that power. So, it's kind of harassment is the go-to in Washington, and I don't know what kind of impact that has on Facebook. You would think for a typical company going to have to, answer hours of questions, be embarrassed publicly, that would bother them. But the fact that Facebook rolled this out when they're already sort of in the doghouse, so to speak, indicates they might not care about that very much.
Do they care about it, Kurt?
I was going to say pretty much the same thing. Here they are rolling out a new cryptocurrency and payments option when they're currently under the investigation from the FTC. So it's clear that they're not super concerned that this is going to, violate any of those other issues they're dealing with.
Now, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of brainstorming about how business could actually work integrating Libra. What have we, what has been discussed in terms of how these businesses could actually operate?
Well, it's all speculation in the sense that Facebook won't say anything yet.
And Libra doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. That helps too, right? It's hard to, so we all have to speculate. But, imagine when I buy something online, I get an email, right? And that email has my receipt and maybe a customer service number and all of this stuff. Like, imagine if all of that was just built into the messaging service that you already use, and that now all of a sudden you're getting your receipt that way. You want to talk to customer service, you can do it there. You want to make an exchange, you do it in the app. You can see how this has potential for a lot of commerce play. I use the word potential purposely, of course, because as you point out, it doesn't exist. It's not used in that way right now, but that is perhaps how we might use it in the future.
All right, many unanswered questions. We'll see how Facebook answers what it can. In July, Kurt Wagner, Jesse Westbrook for Bloomberg. Thank you both. Coming up, in Amazon's quest for e-commerce domination, the company is pushing into yet another industry, beauty. How Amazon plans to take on the likes of longtime beauty players Ulta and Sally next. This is Bloomberg. All right, breaking news. San Francisco has officially become the first major U.S. city to ban the sale of e-cigarettes. The Board of Supervisors has voted to ban the sale of e-cigarettes in stores and online to San Francisco addresses. Of course, this will have a big impact potentially on Juul, the biggest maker of e-cigarettes in the United States, and San Francisco is Juul's hometown. They are working on a ballot initiative for November that would regulate e-cigarettes, but reverse this ban. They just need enough voters to agree. We're going to continue to cover this. This new initiative has to now go to Mayor London Breed for her sign-off. That could take about 10 days, but a potentially big move by the city of San Francisco to ban e-cigarettes as they are on the rise, not just in the United States, but around the world. Okay, meantime, Amazon is making waves in yet another sector, this time in beauty. Monday, Amazon launched a professional beauty store to, quote, offer professional stylists, barbers, and estheticians a convenient, custom shopping experience with great selection. Both Sally Beauty and Ulta took a hit on the news, so how big can Amazon's beauty ambitions go? Joining us now, Anthony Chukumba of Loop Capital. He's got a buy rating on both Ulta and Amazon. Also with us, Jitendra Rawal of Bloomberg Intelligence, who covers Amazon. So, Anthony, what's your take on this? Is this, how bad is it for the beauty companies?
Well, just one correction. I actually have a hold rating on Ulta. I do have a buy rating on Amazon. Look, I think that this is much more of an issue for Sally Beauty than it is for Ulta. Sally Beauty definitely has a business that is B2B, where they are selling beauty supplies to barbers, to salon owners. Ulta, that's really not really their business. It's much more B2C. It's a woman coming in to buy her Estee Lauder makeup, her MAC makeup, and so I really see this as much more of an issue for Sally Beauty than I do for Ulta.
How much of an opportunity, Jitendra, is this for Amazon, and can they step up?
Yeah, I mean, this goes to show Amazon is prioritizing high-margin businesses. Now, if you look at this industry, $87 billion in the U.S. every year, and it's one of the highest margin e-commerce businesses out there. So the strategy over here, I think they need brands, they need the experience to be matched up with others. So that's why they're going with the B2B first, to sort of establish that and then steer it away into B2C. But this is a high margin business that if they are able to penetrate in, it can really help the profit growth.
Right. So, Anthony, is this something that Amazon can pull off? I think, some makers of beauty products would say that, Amazon's checkout experience is fairly transactional. When you want to buy a beauty product, you're looking for more. Can Amazon deliver the experience of beauty products, which can get quite complicated, speaking from the perspective of a woman, or will it just be like another Amazon checkout?
So on the B2C side, I think that's a very valid question. Look, I think that Amazon's really good at replenishment goods. So if I know the type of foundation I always buy, if I know the type of lipstick I always buy, I can obviously order that from Amazon. But when you're talking about discovery of new products, new brands, which is what really speaks to the beauty enthusiast, I think that's a lot tougher for Amazon. There's also the question of whether these high-end prestige brands, who literally in some cases have spent decades building these high-end images, are willing to sell to Amazon. That's not necessarily going to honor manufacturers' suggested retail prices. It's not going to offer the kind of in-store experience that you get at an Ulta Beauty, that you get at Sephora, that you get at the department stores.
Right, and Jitendra, you also have got a number of startups pushing into the beauty industry as a sort of anti-Amazon alternative, like Glossier, which is very focused on branding and marketing and a millennial audience. And I wonder how much competition there is there from an up-and-coming set of companies.
It is a very fragmented market, actually, if you look at it. So everybody has their own edges, if you may, but if you look at what Ulta Beauty has done, they have very strong digital properties, they have very strong physical properties, and I think that's one of the places where Amazon would take time to really sort of match up to it. So I feel like first they are going to learn some lessons here, going through the B2B, do what they're good at, which is replenishments, and in a B2B environment, it's a little bit more predictable than a B2C, and then scale up the experience accordingly from there. But the fragmented market, like you mentioned, is the opportunity for consolidation happening, at least from a long-term perspective.
So, Anthony, what are you going to be watching for as this rolls out?
I think the main thing that I'll be watching for is whether they use the B2B strategy to try to move into B2C, and then if they're moving to B2C, do they get those high-end prestige brands? Because to me, that's the real risk to an Ulta Beauty, to a Sephora. It's less so about the mass market brands.
Right, and also I think pricing is going to be key. Loop Capital's Anthony Jacumba and Jitendra Rawal of Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you both. Well, the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular is the country's largest and oldest 4th of July event. Here is a taste of what to expect. Do not miss the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular. That is live on July 4th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Bloomberg Television. Coming up, a new report from a cybersecurity firm, FireEye, details how Iran is trying to hack U.S. banks. The company's head of threat intelligence joins us next. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Now to a story we've been following: the cyber warfare between nation states. The Trump administration is saying that Russia, China, and Iran all are trying to sway U.S. public opinion ahead of next year's elections, in some cases through social media. This as tensions mount between Tehran and Washington over the downing of a U.S. drone last week, and the U.S. ratcheting up pressure on Iran with new sanctions and a cyber strike. And according to a researcher at cybersecurity firm FireEye, Iranian hackers have stepped up attacks against the United States in recent weeks. That includes attempts to infiltrate banks and government agencies through their computer systems. For more on these attacks, I want to get straight to the source. Sandra Joyce is the head of FireEye's global intelligence, and she joins us now from Washington. So, Sandra, what exactly is the new activity you have identified from Iranian hackers on U.S. targets?
Well, what we're seeing is a barrage of spear phishing emails from multiple threat actors emanating from Iran and targeting multiple sectors, so financials, government, but also media, education, and likely several others.
So what are the objectives here? To just cause disarray?
Right, so spear phishing emails, the objective of most of them is to establish a foothold in a network. Now, this could be just to collect information or intelligence, but what is disconcerting here is that these tools and techniques were actually precursors to more destructive attacks that we saw in 2018 by the same actors. So this could be a look at just trying to get information, but it's likely that this is also a precursor to secondary actions. That's why companies and organizations around the world need to be at high alert with a high level of vigilance.
Now, this is just days after the Iranians shot down a U.S. surveillance drone. We've heard from the president himself that he called off a physical attack in retaliation on Iran, but did approve a cyber attack on Iran's missile and defense capabilities. Could that slow some of these other cyber attacks coming from Iran down?
Well, what we know is that cyber attacks are not a means or an ends. They're a means to actually carry out the national security objectives of nation states. So what we can expect to see going forward is Iran continuing to use cyber means as a asymmetric method in the face of escalating tensions between the United States and Iran.
So the group you call out, APT-33, what do we know about them?
Well, APT-33 is the same group that launched Shamoon malware, which is destructive malware that we saw against international industrial control systems in 2018, in December of 2018. They're a group that has a history of using destructive malware to carry out the nation-state objectives of Iran. Now, it's not just APT-33 that we've been looking at in this recent activity. There have been other groups also from Iran that are carrying out the same type of spear phishing attacks, things that are going to help them get a foothold into networks to possibly take it to the next level.
So how vulnerable would you say U.S. infrastructure is right now? And which parts of U.S. infrastructure are most vulnerable?
Well, the U.S. critical infrastructure spans 16 different industries, so each one of them has strengths and weaknesses. But what we're looking at is the DHS, the CISA director, Christopher Krebs, put out a warning to all U.S. institutions saying that they should be on the lookout for a heightened activity stemming from Iran in response to a lot of the tensions that are going on now.
Now, look, we certainly don't know everything that the U.S. government does in cyberspace, but who has better cyber capabilities, Iran or the United States?
Well, clearly the United States has more mature capabilities, more sophisticated capabilities. But that's not to say that other nation states and with their capabilities couldn't make a real dent in the infrastructure of other countries. So we shouldn't consider it less of a threat. What we're looking at is an increasing sophistication from Iran and the willingness to use cyber tools, both destructive and for espionage purposes, to carry out their end goals.
Now, how concerned are you, based on the activity you've seen over the last just few days, about escalation, given that we are going into a really pivotal U.S. election cycle?
Well, what we're seeing is a great interest in multiple countries, Russia, Iran, et cetera, into the outcome of elections. Even China has taken steps to look at elections within Asia itself, from what we've observed in cyber activity. So the intent to keep tabs on election activity is certainly present. Now, whether or not that activity is going to interfere with the outcome is another thing. We recently saw that Iran was trying to impersonate U.S. candidates, trying to create inauthentic accounts to sway public opinion, and in that way, they're attempting to influence the outcome of elections.
All right, fascinating what's happening out in cyberspace. Sandra Joyce of FireEye, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the Pentagon is preparing for the rollout of its controversial cloud services program, even though the requirements of the $10 billion contract are still being challenged by Oracle in court. This, according to a copy of a Pentagon memo obtained by Bloomberg News. Chris Cornilli is a federal market analyst with Bloomberg Government. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. So, Chris, first of all, what is the status of this contract as it stands right now?
It's great to be with you. Right now, the Pentagon has announced that the the Pentagon will be moving to the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure sometime in late 2020 to fiscal 2021. The May memo from Defense Department CIO Dana Deasy told federal agencies to put current cloud contracts on hold until such time as the Defense Department could assess the requirements for the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure and other cloud programs such as MilCloud 2.0.
Now, competitors have challenged the fact that the Pentagon was planning to award this to a single player, most likely Amazon. How strong is Oracle's case?
Well, Oracle has made the case that the Pentagon biased the solicitation toward Amazon Web Services, and it specifically notes relationships between 3 former Defense Department employees, one of which had done consulting work with Amazon Web Services prior to their stint at the Pentagon, and 2 who had received offers of employment and had not recused themselves after weeks at a time. However, the Defense Department is separating or attempting to rebut these criticisms, claiming that the Defense Department had made these decisions later on in the process, so that the individuals in question were relatively not central to the decision making here.
All right, well, we'll be watching to see what comes next. As Bloomberg has reported, the Pentagon expects to issue this contract for JEDI in late August, no matter what the outcome of these proceedings is or whether or not the outcome has been delivered. Chris Corneli of Bloomberg Government, thanks so much for weighing in. Coming up, the high-stakes world of plant heists. Find out how the hot new theft isn't diamonds or gold, but redwood trees. That's next. This is Bloomberg. When it comes to poachers, you might think of people illegally hunting rhinos for their horns or the massacre of elephants for their ivory tusks. But in California, there's another insidious side to poaching, and one you might not expect. We're talking about thieves who plunder exotic trees and plants from national forests. While it might be hard to abscond with a giant redwood, poachers are targeting flora like slabs of burls or saguaro cacti. And park rangers are turning high-tech to thwart the thieves, using hidden cameras, sensors, and RFIDs. To tell us more, Bloomberg Tech's Sarah McBride, who wrote all about it in this week's heist issue of Bloomberg Business Week. So, tech and thievery. I thought people went to national parks to get away from all that. What's happening here?
I know, it's so bad, but there are so many thieves now hitting up our national parks, and they're taking everything, from the redwood burl slabs you mentioned to cacti to ginseng in the southeast. So now the rangers have no choice. They have to use whatever they can to fight back, and that includes tech. So I just wrote a story about some redwood thieves in Northern California who were caught using a network of hidden cameras. In Saguaro National Park in Arizona, they're injecting microchips into the cacti to try to deter thieves. And in those parks in Virginia and North Carolina, they're dyeing the roots of ginseng so that if they find ginseng for sale, they can immediately identify where it came from. And the craziest, I had no idea trees have DNA.
Right, so I was going to ask you about the DNA testing.
Right, so 3 years ago, some people were apprehended and convicted of stealing maple trees in the northwestern United States, convicted in federal court based on evidence of the tree's DNA. They can take a tree or a piece of wood and match it to, say, a tree stump in a forest thousands of miles away, and they know this piece of wood came from that tree stump.
So then how do they track down the thief?
Whoever was trying to sell it. So that person still has to somehow be attached to the wood. In the case of the maple wood, it's often sold for guitars and things like that.
All right, so saguaro cacti, I had to look it up. These are the cacti that you see in like pictures of the desert.
The iconic woody woodpecker cacti.
Exactly. What's happening with these?
So a few years ago, there was a spate of theft of those cacti in Arizona, and they actually, you can get a surprising amount of money. $100 a foot is the going rate apparently for those. So if you have a 10-foot cactus, that's $1,000 right there. So the rangers decided to implement a program of microchipping their cacti. So they go around with these special guns, inject chips into the cacti, and then they can swipe an RFID over any cactus and see if it came from the park. They think that's been enough of a deterrent that people have stopped, or not on the same scale as it was before, poaching those cacti.
There's even a role for social media here. How
Yes,
so?
there is. So that's in ways hurting the parks, because here in California, there's been a spate of theft of little succulents that grow on cliffs called Dudleya. They've actually caught thousands and thousands of those that people are trying to smuggle to Asia, where they've become a big thing. And that's because of things like Instagram feeds, where everybody now wants these little succulents.
About succulents.
Right. But they can also catch people more easily thanks to those social media feeds too. So it cuts both ways.
So interesting. So should we assume that Big Brother is even at the national park watching us when we are going on our peaceful and leisurely hike through the redwood forest?
Unfortunately, the surveillance state even reaches into our national parks. So yes, we should.
So, what's sort of next here? I mean, obviously we're talking about national treasures.
Right.
How well do, park rangers think that technology can help in cracking down on these practices?
It's a cat and mouse game, but for example, with redwood burls, if they didn't have the hidden cameras, unless they caught somebody in the act of actually trying to steal these pieces of wood, which are hundreds, sometimes thousands of years old, there's no way they could get that person. Now they have a decent chance of getting them. So I think the odds are good.
Okay, so last week you talked to us about tech companies chasing down bird scientists. This week it's stolen cacti. What's next, Sarah McBride?
Emily, actually, it is Burning Man. So look out for my Burning Man story.
All right, I'm sure that'll be a colorful
Yes.
one, and we'll have you back to talk about it. Sarah McBride, thank you so much
Thank you
for joining us. You can hear more from Bloomberg Businessweek's magazines and editors and reporters every Saturday and Sunday on Business Week on Bloomberg Television. All right, well, when you're one of the 3 richest men in the world, you might not have a lot of regrets. But Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates says his biggest mistake ever came in mobile phone software. Gates told David Rubenstein at a Bloomberg event in Washington that Microsoft lost out to Google in launching a mobile operating system to compete with Apple.
We missed being the dominant mobile operating system by a very tiny amount. We were distracted during our antitrust trial. We didn't assign the best people to do the work. So it's the biggest mistake I made in terms of something that was clearly within our skill set. We were clearly the company that should have achieved that, and we didn't.
Gates added that mistake cost Microsoft billions of dollars that eventually went to Google for its Android system. Still ahead, SpaceX just aced what it says may be its most difficult mission yet. How Tuesday's launch may strengthen its business with the government. Next, this is Bloomberg. One of Hollywood's legendary studios is getting its first female CEO. AT&T has named Ann Sarnoff to take over at Warner Brothers. She's currently president at BBC Studios America. Sarnoff will replace Kevin Tsujihara, who was ousted following a sexual misconduct scandal. While it was a milestone morning for SpaceX, the company launched its Falcon Heavy rocket for the U.S. military early Tuesday in what CEO Elon Musk described as the company's toughest mission yet. The rocket delivered 24 satellites into 3 distinct orbits, while its twin boosters landed safely back on Earth. The mission could lead to additional business for SpaceX from the U.S. government. Joining us to discuss, Bloomberg's Justin Bachman. So, Justin, what was so tough about this particular mission?
Well, it was the first mission that SpaceX had flown the Falcon Heavy at night, so that was sort of the first layer of intrigue for them. And then secondly, they had 3 different orbits that they had to take the payload to. So you've got commercial customers, you had NASA, you had the Air Force, and they were essentially making 3 stops on the way up, and it kind of turned into a delivery truck of sorts. So it was tricky in the sense of getting the orbits right, very high-paying customers, very important cargo. And then you had to do the landing as well. They did the side boosters on land, which worked out. They tried to do the main engine on the drone ship at sea, which did not work out. So that has more work to be done.
Right, it was mostly successful, except that the center core failed to land on that drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. What went wrong there?
Well, it's hard to say at this point. The last time they tried it, it didn't work. There was some winds involved. It could have been weather. I think we'll find out soon enough, and they'll sort it out. It's probably not a huge deal. But, in the larger scheme, I think that Elon Musk probably was also a little bit nervous because this was an audition of sorts for future government work for the Air Force. And I think this is a case where there are 4 companies looking for that. The Air Force is probably going to choose 2 of them. And there's some stiff competition involved there. So this is a very important revenue stream for much of the 2020s. And I think that was a big part of the issue last night for SpaceX.
So going forward, what does this mean for SpaceX? Of course, Elon Musk, as usual, has set some very ambitious goals, doesn't always hit them, but plans to be sending a human into space not long from now.
Right. The plan for a human is this year. I think last night's launch was a big deal for SpaceX in the sense that it showed we can get to separate orbits on a flight. And it was kind of in a way, a taste of the future, in that the industry is moving that way. You've got to be able to do that. You've got different customers. They want to be in different places. They've got different satellites. And I think it was important that they showed that they can do that. And they also showed it that it's with the largest, current rocket that's flying for the type of payload that the Air Force needs occasionally.
So how does this position SpaceX in the private space race, also vis-a-vis the U.S. government, and what other countries are doing?
Well, SpaceX is looking at some stiff competition from United Launch Alliance and Northrop Grumman, as well as Blue Origin, which is interested in some Air Force work as well. That type of work is important because it's very steady. It's a solid revenue stream. The Air Force is always sending up national security packages, and I think that's one of the things that they all want because it's solid. It's a good base of income, and then you can do other things. You can learn a lot from that type of work. So it's really important for SpaceX and the others, and it's going to be a hard-fought competition.
All right. I know you'll continue to cover it for us. Bloomberg's Justin Bachman there from Dallas. Justin, thanks so much for joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We are, as always, live streaming on Twitter. Check us out there at Technology. And be sure to follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.